ليس اليتيم الذي قد مات والده إن اليتيم
Assalamu alaikum and welcome to the Islamic Literary Society's podcast. I am your host, Abdul Hai. The belief that colonization has ended is one of the greatest delusions and one of the most effective tricks ever played by the West upon the Muslim world. Yes, one may argue that physical occupation of the Muslim has largely ended, and yet far greater and more dangerous form of colonization remains. It is more sophisticated, more organized, and far more intellectually calculated. This is the colonization of the mind. It is fair to say that the Muslim Ummah continues to live under the West, not through any presence of military force, but through ideas, value, and way of thinking that shapes the way we Muslims view ourselves, our faith, and our place in this world. But yet, there is another layer of colonization that is perhaps more effective, that many of us are unaware of, even those who are actively trying to decolonize their mind. And this is what Dr. William Barylo calls metacolonialism. In his recent book published by the Oxford University Press titled British Muslim in the Neoliberal Empire, Resisting, Healing and Flourishing in the Metacolonial Era, Dr. William argues that there exists a form of colonization so deeply embedded in our mind and in our very DNA that we no longer recognize it as a form of colonization. Today we will be exploring his thesis, reflect on its implication, consider how within our limited ability we can begin to overcome and free ourselves from the metacolonial condition. It is my great pleasure, Dr. William, to welcome you to the show. Assalamu alaikum.
Walaikum salam. Thank you for having me.
It's great to have you on the show. Perhaps if we start off with the very title of your book, British Muslim in the Neoliberal Empire, Resisting, Healing and Flourishing in the Metacolonial Era. It's a loaded title. If you can perhaps break it down.
Yeah, so metacolonialism is a hegemonic form of colonization that is global, that is total, meaning that it reaches at every single aspect of human existence, whether it is culture, education, the justice system, the economy, politics, the society. So to put it very simply, I like to compare it to cancer, to stage 4 cancer. You know that it is called metastasis. So it's when a cancer has spread well beyond the original organ it originates from. So, and colonialism is very similar in the sense that it has spread way beyond the original sources, centers of power that were at play during the era of colonization. And this is a term that it's not mine. It has been coined by a professor in psychology named Hussein Bulhan. So he is the founder of the Frantz Fanon University in Hargeisa in Somaliland. And his study was focused on the mental health care system in Sudan. In Sudan, he observed that the way people practiced mental health care in the system was completely disconnected from the actual needs of the people and the cultural context. And the reason for that is because people had copied and pasted almost verbatim the Eurocentric models of mental health care for various reasons. So, and he argues that, even though the empires do not exist in terms of, like the British Empire, the French Empire are not defined by their geographic boundaries, now we have come to an era where people's minds are colonized by these colonial centers of power. And to go further, it is a colonization where there's no clear boundary between who is a colonizer and who is a colonized anymore. Back in the post-colonial era, when the empires were dissolving little by little, people had made, like Albert Memmi made this clear distinction that we have a colonizer, colonized. Now Hussein Boulan argues that people who were historically oppressed can become oppressors in turn. And we see it through various examples. For example, you have lots of people who identify as Muslim, but at the same time who would peddle an anti-Muslim narratives, anti-migrant narratives, people saying that Islam needs reform, and or one very simple example is how many people who submit, I would say, to the litmus test of talking about Palestine. If you don't want anything to happen to your position, you're going to censor yourself. And in the same way, people have been, it's not illegal, for example, to talk about Palestine, but the consequences are such that people are strongly suggested to erase their morals, their ethics, their beliefs, their identity, their faith, in order to conform, in order to fit in the system, in order to receive basic human rights, like the right to have a job. Or because if you talk about it, for example, we've seen students or other people having their visas revoked and being deported, like in the US it happened. So it is, I would say, metacolonialism is this hegemony that touches every single aspect of human existence, and where we are more or less forced, strongly suggested to dip and participate into the system of oppression, even if we don't want it.
Building up on what you said, do you believe that despite the formal end of colonial power, much of the Muslim world remains subject to form of mental and intellectual colonization? Specifically, do the Muslim society continue to look at their reality, their space within the framework and conceptual value and worldview that they inherited from the former colonial power?
Yeah, that's exactly what's happening right now. So, it is something people like Frantz Fanon have called, wearing white masks. Or, Malcolm X was talking about aspirational whiteness. So, on the extreme of the spectrum, you have people like Sajid Javid, Zia Yusuf, Reform UK, now Shabana Mahmoud, who are actually doing the work of the colonizers, despite themselves being, people from the margins. But it also happens in a more subtle way, in the sense, for example, if we look at beauty standards and this around the globe, how many people have something about bleaching the skin, lightening the skin, for example, and this is something that has been inherited from colonial times. And you have a lot of other examples. And when it comes to, for example, consumerism, it is very, it has come to our attention in the recent years that, very, very bad labor practices some of the big brands have. And now you have, to show the irony, when you, for example, you become a Nike influencer, a Nike ambassador, you are promoting products that are very likely to have been produced by other Muslims in forced labor camps. So we have come to this paradox where the Ummah, is to say, is drinking its own blood. It is something, if we realize, that the colonizers, they are like chill. They don't have to lift the finger anymore, because they have enough people replicating, like doing the work.
It's interesting that you mention this. At a conference held at Tehran University, Professor Muhammad Marandi delivered a speech in which he argued that what is commonly presented as the upper end of female beauty in magazine and fashion house in Tehran is predominantly a Eurocentric one. The idea that a woman, the perfection of woman's beauty, is the one that has blonde and blue eyes. He suggests that such image does not reflect the appearances of Iranian women, and thus it is a form of subtle indoctrination and cultural colonization. I suppose my next question to you is, do you believe and do you think that the Muslim world, at least the leadership, is actively, knowingly, and consciously in trying to transform uh, their countries into the image of the West? Or do you think they're naive? Or do you think they're just doing it for economical reason?
Yeah, there's many layers. It can be economic or financial. It can be cultural. It can be ideological, but it could be also because of peer pressure. Professor Mahmoud Mamdani. So he wrote a book called Good Muslim, Bad Muslim. And to illustrate how these colonial dynamics are into effect in the modern world. And so for the US and the UK and the European states in general, so you have official government documents that tell the government which are the Muslims they should collaborate with and which one they should avoid. And in these documents, when it comes to the good Muslims, that's to say, so these like think tanks recommend the governments to engage only with those Muslims who are rich, in positions of power, who are secular, who are very liberal, who are who do not basically attach importance to Islam as a framework for life or for social justice. So, and since this narrative, this is something very visible in the US. You have lots of a constellation of organizations that their job is to, I would say, deliver a government stamp on these good Muslims. So you have something like the Muslim Leadership Initiative, which is a Zionist organization. And if you, for example, you're Muslim and you want to secure a job in like the government or for the New York Times or in Hollywood, this is the organization you need to go to. And of course, if you don't abide by their views, so you're going to be categorized as one of the bad Muslims. Because if you do not support the Israeli policies, the Israeli rhetorics, nobody is going to want to do business with you. So this is something which is at play, and it's very well documented. And I refer to the book, The Islamophobia Industry by Nathan Lean, where you have businessmen, media outlets, universities, other philanthropists who have literally invested millions of dollars into other media outlets, universities, education institutions, and so on to promote an anti-Islam narrative. So when you are faced with such a power in front of you, and all you want to do is to put food on the table for your family. So not only yet, this is, if you want to get a job, you're gonna conform. And of course, you're gonna find people who want to conform because they have also internalized this idea that Islam is something from their parents or their ancestors, something backwards, and progress means secularism, progress means liberalism, or just conforming with the system. So you have a lot of different reasons, but I think we should not underestimate that many people don't necessarily want to do this, but are forced to do it somehow. So I interviewed someone who joined a counter-extremism think tank at some point. There's someone who is my age, and he told me, I really don't want to do it, but I have a family, I have two kids. I need to pay the bills somehow. So it shows, how the power of this hegemonic colonization, how it makes us prisoners in a way of the system of idea, and it's very difficult to get out of it.
I can understand why certain Muslim at an individual level might work with organizations such as Prevent, albeit I may disagree with it. My question is perhaps broader and different. Why are Muslim majority countries that are supposedly independent still actively work against Islam in its policy, in its discourse, and in its international initiative? That not only creates a environment for anti-Islam and Islamophobia to flourish, but also creates a picture of Islam through the European nominative framework. Moreover, why do some of the Muslim states even go further, such as UAE, who has came up with this alien concept, the so-called Abrahamic Accord, thinking that they can portray Islam the way the West wants. Are there, to say it again, are they economical pressure? I mean, the Muslim world are rich, so how do you explain that?
So now we're entering the domain of political science, which is beyond my field of expertise because I focus on like microscopic level. But talking about these countries, I think they're just being pragmatic and they're just interested in what makes them sustainable on the global on a global scale in the long term, whether it is financially or politically. I don't think they're really interested in preserving Islam as a framework for life or for society. And this is something I reflected on because I personally don't believe that there is such thing as a Muslim or Islamic country, which would suppose that these countries follow Islam to the T. So in academia, we say Islamicate countries, which means inspired by Islam, but it doesn't mean that the people follow Islam, or the government follow Islam to the T. We've seen, now the UAE is building casinos on their land. Like who would have thought 10 years ago that it would happen? It's crazy. So it's clearly not in the interest of Muslims or Islam. This is just like a very hard and cold calculated financial and political decisions, in my opinion.
Moving on perhaps to the second theme of your book, where you seem to make a link between colonization and mental health and healing. Is there a link? And if so, how? And can you expand on that?
So yeah, completely. Because when we think about colonization, one of the main strategies of colonization is divide and conquer. Modernity, as defined by Alain Touraine, is a culture of separation. So what has happened to the world, and also not only Muslims, but the whole of the society, we have witnessed the breakdown, the atomization of the society, the atomization of neighborhoods, the atomization of families. People grow separately. We have a culture which is increasingly individualistic as a culture of separation. It has atomized, broken down social structures, such as it has broken down neighborhoods, families. It is a culture which is increasingly individualistic, and by separating ourselves from each other, from the environment, by disconnecting things, well, of course, this is a way for how colonization was able to achieve control. But the solution to that is then to reconnect things, reconnect people, rethink our relationship with our surroundings, with ourselves, and also reconnect with the divine, because colonization was also about, I would say, vehiculating this very, I would say, Eurocentric / Christian way of considering religion. And this is how we have seen how, for many people, Islam has been reduced to, for example, only rituals, while it is a complete philosophy, which, we can't call Islam a religion. It's absolutely not the same thing. It's something way bigger, I argue. But because of the impact of this separation and simplification, categorization, this is something that has been lost and we need to find back somehow.
How do you see that Muslim experience mental health and healing within the metacolonial framework, and how they construct their own social and environmental space in order to heal and cope with the mental issues and social anxiety?
I think we're just at the very beginning of this trend. What is happening is, since some of the main social justice movements, such as Me Too, Black Lives Matter, and the pandemic, with the help of social media, people have been more aware about mental health. They have been able to put words in what they are feeling. Oh, what I'm feeling is depression, it's anxiety, it can be PTSD, and at the same time they have been made aware that these conditions have names and there are solutions for them to fix these problems, there's to say. So people have been able to articulate more effectively what is happening to them and link this to how the society works. These problems do not come out of a vacuum. It is because of how this society pushes us to burn out, to be productive, but at what cost? Not mentioning the trauma of racism, not mentioning the trauma that we may have inherited from our parents. For example, my parents, they migrated to France without a penny to their name. They moved away from Poland to escape communism. And all the mistakes they did in their life, they never taught me or my sister. We never talked about these kind of things. There's no tradition of storytelling in our family. So how are we supposed to learn about not making the same mistakes our parents made? So what has been happening is more awareness, but at the same time, there is a reconnection happening. So in my book, I talk about projects such as the Green Dean Tribe here in the UK, which is a bunch of sisters who have started doing events around the protection of the environment, whether it is retreats in the countryside, whether it is green iftars, so without plastic waste, without food waste, and without meat, for example, and raising awareness that we need to be more connected to environment from a vacuum. In our Islamic tradition, we are taught that the earth is our masjid. And so Rabia Mali, who is one of the founders of the Green Dean Tribe, when she organizes events, she always starts by asking, is this place, do you feel at home in this place? Is this place, i.e. the UK, your masjid? Because the problem with colonization and all these hegemonic forms of oppression, we have grown disconnected to the land we live in. We are not able to, let's say, name all the species of trees or the birds surrounding us. And if we were to uphold our duty of stewardship, khilafah, in this land, we need to be rooted in this environment. We need to be familiar with it so we can connect with it and we can take care of it. So not only the natural environment, but it goes the same goes for everyone around us, whether we're talking about friends, neighbors, family, or even ourselves. We need to be aware of what people are going through and what is people's capacity, so we can be here for them. That's, I think, a very simple, it's a very simple philosophy rooted in our tradition. It's just, I think, a matter of time before it takes off.
It seems that you're suggesting due to colonial entity and their influence, we Muslims have somehow become separate. Do you think then we can use the same tool that is available to us, operate within the colonial framework, not only for the Muslim, but other community, can be used to reconnect?
Yeah, I think, because this colonization is multi-layer, there's many variables. Any potential and possible means to distance ourselves from structures of oppression is good, whether we're talking about arts, whether we're talking about social initiatives, even if we're talking at the individual level, thinking about what do we consume. Because it's very easy to say that, we're going to try to ourselves, but we're so deeply bathing in colonial structures that it's easier said than done. For example, if we look at the banking system, like, can we live without being a customer for a bank, without a credit card or a debit card? The devices we use, the computers, the phones, by who are they made? Who has extracted the resources, the minerals that go into these phones, and at which cost? So it's extremely difficult. But I believe that with very small actions, it's possible to make a huge difference. And what I've seen, in not only in my field work, because most of the organizations I follow are always organizations that start without much resources, not much money. They don't have much followers on social media. They don't have big names supporting them. But still, because they believe in their cause and they persevere through the years, it's a long journey. But organically, more and more people connect to them. And this is how 10 years down the line, they're able to make a big difference. I was attending some of the workshops of the Green Dean tribe 10 years ago, and they would gather maybe 5, 6, 7 people during workshops. But fast forward 2019, they organized this green iftar in London in a place called Rumi's Cave, and 300 people came. So that's a proof that even if you don't have much resources, it's possible to achieve things. And when it comes to us at a consumer level, I think one thing that uh, the Palestinian movement for liberation has done is that lots of people are now aware of things such as BDS, boycott, divest, and sanction. It has become almost normal for now people to boycott certain coffee chains, certain like drinks, because of their implications in the genocide. And I think this is a concept that should be replicated in like all sorts of spheres of life. Thinking very simply about what are the brands we buy, thinking about what are the shops we go to, and think of like how ethical and fair, how Islamic, let's say, are the products they offer us. If not, if they don't respond to our criteria of justice and fairness, then it's perfectly fine to boycott them, because this is the law of capitalism. The less demand there is for a product, the less people are going to produce it. So, and the same goes for social media. Can we be careful about who do we give the likes, the subscribes, and the follows? Because now in the era of the attention economy, this is like money. This is power that we give people by engaging with certain accounts. So if we don't agree with someone, we can also, divest ourselves from the systems of oppression. And this is, the very Islamic in the way that Islam came, the message of God came for us to divest from oppression, divest from idolatry, divest from the harmful traditions people were doing at the time, and reconnect with what is fair, what is just, what is sustainable for the environment and for human life.
As we come to the conclusion of our discussion, I would like to ask you, how does the average Muslim understand metacolonization, and how does one works toward decolonizing oneself? Is there a method, or does it require one to embark on a new journey outside the existing social structure? What do you think is the process of such a journey?
So yeah, it's very simple. It's about asking ourselves every day, to our tradition, are we being stewards in every action we undertake, every decision we make, every word we say? Because if we follow the sunnah of the Prophet, peace be upon him, what does it mean? The Prophet, peace be upon him, was sent to humanity as a mercy. So, if we think about what is our goal and our mission as Muslims here on earth, to be stewards, to be khilafah, it's about asking ourselves this same question. In any action we make, any word we say, any decision we make, are we being a mercy? Are we being khilafah in what we're doing or not? And, that's my guiding principle for life. Are the things we're doing with we're buying a coffee at a certain place, we're buying this kind of food, this drink, is it something that creates more harm on the long term, even if I don't see it, or is this something that goes in the way of justice, in the way of being a khilafah, steward on earth?
Unfortunately, we have come to the end of our program. I would like to extend my sincere thanks to Dr. William for taking time out to be with us today. Jazakumullah khairan. And we welcome everyone to visit our website, www.islamicliterarysociety.com, where you can learn more about us and our work and contribute to our mission and our project. I would also like to thank all our listeners for joining us. We truly appreciate your continued support. Till next time, wassalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.
ليس اليتيم الذي قد مات والده، إن اليتيم يتيم العلم والأدب.